Do you want to break the shackles of constructive Magic the Gathering? Then look no further. Here's a list of 2-card combos that can pretty much win you the game. We will first take a look at Helm of the Host, which has the ability to equip to any creature and create a copy of that creature during the combat step, whether it's legendary or not. It also gives it haste until the end of turn as well. When paired with a creature like Godo, you can immediately search for the artifact, and when you equip it to him and give him haste, you can get extra combat steps, which is essentially game ending as long as the opponent doesn't have something to block with every turn. Another creature that can take extra combat steps is Aurelia, but there's also a wide range of creatures that can take extra turns and use it, such as Port Razor and Cruel Celebrant as well. One you may have not thought of is Timeless Navigator, in order to take infinite turns as well, because you'll be able to constantly put the token under your deck and have that one keep spawning one every turn. Next, we will take a look at Saheeli, which has a -2 activated ability of creating a token copy of any creature you have on the battlefield. Combining this with Felindar Guardian, it gives you infinite copies because you can flicker Saheeli, constantly getting her ability back and causing another token of the Felindar Guardian. And if you wish to go infinite with spells, look no further than Dualcaster Mage, which has the triggered ability of when it enters the battlefield, it can copy any instant or sorcery that is on the stack, and with it being flash, you can play it on your opponent's turns as well. You're going to combine this with a Twin Flame, which will make a copy of the Dualcaster Mage, thus making that copy come on the battlefield on the stack and allowing you to copy the Twin Flame again, which will make infinite copies of the Dualcaster Mage with haste, basically winning you the game if they don't have some type of board wipe. Heat Simmer is a similar card as well, just being 1 mana more, but doing the exact same ability, so as long as they don't have any blockers, you'll be able to full swing and win the game. Now, if you want infinite mana, look no further than Ghostly Flicker, allowing you to not only flicker the Dualcaster Mage, which will then be able to copy the Ghostly Flicker, you can also flicker your lands, which will then allow you to get infinite mana because you'll be able to instantly cast them and put them back on the battlefield, tap them, and do the same effect over and over again. Another new card that works excellent with Dualcaster Mage is Sublime Epiphany, which not only can allow you to draw your entire deck, but you can also have your opponents draw their entire deck. You could also bounce every piece on the board and basically do a lot of shenanigans with this, but it is a higher cost card, which makes it a lot harder to play around. But really, if you're just looking to create infinite tokens of the Dualcaster Mage, there's so many options, anywhere from just black to blue to red, that it's impossible to not want to pick one of these to create infinite copies of Dualcaster Mage, but also can have some other synergies in other decks as well. But if you prefer the infinite mana route, I recommend getting the spell Snap. It will return the Snapcaster Mage and allowing you to then untap 2 lands, and then with that on the stack you can recast Dualcaster Mage, which will then return Dualcaster Mage, thus allowing you to untap 2 lands. As long as you have 2 lands that tap for at least 2 or greater mana, this will net you infinite mana, so get yourself a Lotus Field or a double land and you are good to go. And while we're on the subject of infinite mana, let's look at none further than Devoted Druid, which will give us 1 mana, and we can also untap it to put a negative counter on it, which will thus then give us that 1 green mana then. To abuse this, we simply turn our Devoted Druid into an artifact or an enchantment, which then will make sure that those negative counters have no impact on it. Because it is not a creature anymore, it does not die from getting those negative counters, which means infinite green mana for you. Another way we can manipulate this is using the Vizier Memories, which will not even allow that negative counter to be even put onto our Devoted Druid, which will still give us infinite mana. With so many ways to manipulate Devoted Druid, it's just about finding the right color combinations or what fits your deck best. Now, if you're just here for big stompy boy combos, then look no further than Herd Baloth, which has the ability of whenever a +1 counter is put on it, create another 4/4 beast, which essentially can go off on anything that can immediately put counters on those beasts, such as Ivy Lane Denizen, which will immediately put counters on anything that's green entering the battlefield. A newer card with a similar effect is Rosie, which now has the ability whenever a token enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on anything that's not Rosie, which all those bailiffs coming onto the battlefield are going to be tokens, so they'll be getting counters on them as well. One of the best old cards to play with this is Cathar's Crusade, which will just put counters on every creature as soon as a new creature enters the battlefield, so by far you're going to have an unstoppable army by the time anybody has any chance to respond. But let's say you want to get tokens out on a cheaper price, then look no further than the Presence of Gond, which is an enchantment that when you enchant a creature, that enchanted creature can then tap to create a 1/1 body. When you pair this with something like Midnight Guard, then you can essentially tap him to create a 1/1, and then because of his ability, he will then untap, which you will then be able to tap him then again and infinitely do that until you have enough bodies on the field that you feel comfortable to win the game with. This can also be comboed with Intruder Alarm, which says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, go ahead and untap all your creatures, which will then make you have infinite creatures just like the Midnight Guard. But maybe you don't care about creature tokens. Maybe you just want one big creature like that Herd Baloth and you don't really care about the tokens. Then I give you none other than Enduring Scalelord, which has the ability whenever one or more counters are put on other creatures, then Enduring Scalelord will also be getting a +1 counter as well. When paired with Wildwood Scourge, you can essentially create a loop where they get infinite counters and then you can just swing in with a big guy. Another way is just to make copies of it that come in with counters on it, like Altered Ego, or you also have Spark Double. There's also the possibility of you using the new snow permanent, Morite of the Frost. These are the best ways to do it because they put counters on them immediately, which will then trigger him. But anything that can make copies of him as well, like Helm of the Host or Kiki Jiki or Split Flame, any one of those will also be able to have him go off. You just need to have something that also allows him to put counters on them as well. But you're not just here for tokens or infinite mana or infinite counters. You want to be able to drain people for all their life in one turn. And let's talk about Exquisite Blood, which has the ability of whenever an opponent takes damage, you gain that life. Combined with the enchantment Sanguine Bond, you essentially, anytime you would gain life, an opponent loses life. So it causes a feedback loop, which anytime an opponent loses life or you gain life, they're gonna lose all their life. And if you don't have Sanguine Bond, there's a variety of creatures that all do the similar effects that will essentially have all your opponents lose all their life. And if you have at least 50 life, you can just Aetherflux Reservoir and shoot somebody for 50, gain the 50 back, and do it all over again. But let's say you hate just one particular player at the game and you want them to lose the game. Well then, you can look at Peer into the Abyss, which has the activated ability of a target player draws half their deck and loses half their life. So combining this with pretty much anything that has a draw and lose life, or you draw double that many cards, you can essentially just have that person lose the game automatically. You want to pair this up with things like Orcish Bowmaster or Nixilis, Sheoldred. All of these will allow you to basically kill that one particular opponent in one go. One of my personal favorite combos though is definitely going to be the Putrid Goblin. Because it has the persist ability, it basically can never die. And because it's so cheap, you can usually get it out there very early and give it a lot of abilities to never die. And then as long as you have a sack outlet, you can essentially have a free sacrifice every time you want to use something. Now to make him unkillable, all you need is something to put counters on him, like a Marcus or Renata. Those essentially will make him unkillable. You can also go with a much cheaper option such as Grumgoli or the new Luminous Broodmoth as well, which can put a flying counter, then when he dies he can get the negative counter instead of getting the flying counter, which is inevitable as well. And if you already have a sack outlet, you can just use Mazurek, which will essentially put +1 counters on any creature as soon as you sacrifice a creature, which is Putrid Goblin, which will come in with a +1 counter. So infinite sacrifices there as well. Hey, thanks for watching the video, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. With thousands of 2-card combos in Magic the Gathering, it's impossible to put them all into one video, but hopefully you learned some new tricks along the way that you will now be the last Elder Dragon on the table, because we all know there can only be one.
And his name is
Nicol Bolas.